And so the idea that someone who is willing to commit the crime of murder is unwilling to commit a low-level carry crime is just insane. It's insane.
We are the Armed Attorneys. Today we're talking about a very important topic. It's what is the fight after constitutional carry? Now, we've seen this going on in states across the United States. The majority of states now have some form of constitutional or permitless carry, and we've kind of seen this effect going on across the nation where people think like, woohoo, cross the victory finish line, and then they just kind of stop and enthusiasm dies. But we're here to say there is a lot of work to do. Today we're going to be talking about the three most important fights we think exist after constitutional or permitless carry passes. But before we begin, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting that like button.
And today we're going to ask you to support the channel by checking out our merch store. You can find it on the YouTube Armed Attorneys page. As you can see, we have beautiful new mugs available. It does help the channel. It helps us, and we appreciate it. So I want to talk about, like, we saw it happen in Texas this year, right? You have constitutional carry, and then what happens immediately is gun people get lazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's no other way of putting it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, what do we do after constitutional carry? And the truth is, not only is the fight not over, but the anti-gun side can sense that we've gotten lazy. I mean, in Texas, we need to see what's going to be signed into law and what's not, but it is quite possible in Texas that we can lose ground still this year.
Well, and we just see the pure enthusiasm gap. I mean, if we want to just, again, we're in Texas, we're going to use Texas as an example, but the number of anti-2A things that would hurt self-defense bills that were filed were probably 10 to 1.
Yes.
And the people showing out to testify in these committee hearings and provide their written testimony, again, 10 to 1, maybe even more than that. So, but we're here to say the fight's not over.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about the three most important things you need to be talking to your gun groups about. If you have organizations that are fighting for your rights and on your state level, these are what we think are really important. So the first one I want to talk about is self-defense rights.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, even in, really strong self-defense states and strong pro-gun states, you don't always have kind of the best of the best self-defense law. I mean, we can look to states like Florida, Georgia. Those are great examples. But even good pro-2A states are not always the best on self-defense. And it's an easy place to find yourself lacking, but extraordinarily important. I think now more than ever. I mean, I've been practicing self-defense law 9 years now, I guess. And in these short 9 years, the fury and fire with which prosecutors and police go after self-defense cases has shot up exponentially. I mean, I couldn't even have imagined 9 years ago what it would look like today.
Yeah, you look at this and, I mean, the way a self-defense case was treated 10 years ago, completely different than the way it's treated today.
Oh, yeah.
So some kind of actionable steps to talk to your gun groups about is, what we call pretrial immunity hearings. I think this is where we need to move the fight because we see, when we look at a self-defense claim, the only people that are legally required to consider a self-defense claim right now are a trial judge and a trial jury in most states. And what does that mean for the self-defenders? They get arrested, they get dragged through the system. A grand jury isn't legally required to consider these things for an indictment. The prosecutor, when evaluating the case, all the way up through the plea bargaining stage, the first time that somebody's actually required to impose a standard and judge a self-defense claim is at the fact finder, trial judge, trial jury. Now, what does this have an effect of? I mean, it really punishes self-defenders. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people who, let's say they are found not guilty at trial. Do they feel like winners?
No, because you've already lost. I mean, you've lost so much money, you've lost so much time, you've probably lost your job. You're not going to get a new one while a murder case is pending against you. You've lost your reputation because, I mean, the news covers these things. People around you know that you've been charged with murder. It's just, and I mean, look at, Kyle Rittenhouse, great example. Half of the country at least thinks, well, that's just a murderer who got away with it. He didn't win.
No.
His life is not better for that not guilty. I mean, it's better than it would be for the guilty verdict.
He was sentenced to 40 years of CPAC speeches.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
No, and I think what a pretrial immunity hearing does is it moves up the timeline by which we have that legal imposition where self-defense has to be considered, hopefully we save the life and livelihoods of self-defenders, because essentially what we see is the only people who have something to lose are regular people. These
Yes.
criminals who they don't have any assets, they don't have jobs, they have no future, they, don't value themselves. They don't care if they lose anything. They have
No.
nothing to lose. But us regular folks, yeah, we got stuff to lose. And so it's really important to move up that timeline.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about the second thing that we think is an important fight post constitutional or permitless carry, and that's statutory preemption. And that may be a new term for some folks. What does that just mean generally?
Sure. So when a governmental body preempts a field of law, it's basically saying that those smaller governmental bodies under it cannot regulate in that field. We have some things that are preempted by federal law, but when we're talking about firearms, generally the body who's going to preempt you is the state government. And if you don't have state preemption of firearm law, you have a patchwork of different laws. And there are different levels of preemption. So even if you live in a state where you say, oh, I think we do have state preemption, there are still things that your local, municipal, and county governments can regulate. And once you find those little blue patches, they will. And, I mean, why is it important?
So it comes down to uniformity.
Mhm.
And I think the best way to summarize it. We want uniform gun laws in each state. And they use this in gun grab. This is a legitimate tactic in the mind of the gun grabber is creating administrative confusion.
Yeah.
Ooh, I know this gun is prohibited in some county in this state. That might discourage folks who maybe that's the best weapon or tool to defend themselves. That might discourage them from, engaging in otherwise lawful behavior. Now, how do we fix this and why is it so important? You got to have strong preemption laws. You got to anticipate changes in the future, because and this is a problem I think we're having in Texas, and I think eventually we'll get it fixed, because the gun grabbers are always changing. They want to add some kind of red flag, or they want to ban certain types of guns, or they want to impose requirements that you have insurance, or
Taxes and insurance.
yeah,
Yeah.
tax firearms, or so because they are constantly changing, what we see is a lot of states' preemption laws were written and they've been on the books for a long time,
Mhm.
but they don't address these kind of new wave issues that are showing up. And so, building a strong, all-encompassing preemption law on the state level to make sure the gun laws are uniform throughout the state, that's important.
And one with teeth too,
Yes.
because a lot of times what you have is a preemption law that exists, but is really, really hard to enforce. I mean, I can think of an example here in Texas, right? I mean, we have preemption here. The city of San Antonio still says you can't have a loaded long gun in public. The police will still stop you, hassle you, check your gun, issue you citations, and then they get dismissed before there's really any way to challenge the city and put them in their place, but they've still hassled the gun owner and they've made it such that you're like, all right, man, maybe I just, there are just some rights I won't exercise in San Antonio because of the hassle to be proven right. And why can they do that? Because there's no affirmative teeth in this law, affirmative enforcement mechanism for a citizen to say, this is on the books and I'm going to sue you now before someone gets in trouble. So,
Yeah, and what that looks like on the federal level is national reciprocity. When we think
mhm.
about preemption, that would be telling, hey, states, you cannot, we're taking the authority away from you to decide on which licenses and permits you're going to recognize with regard to, carrying a handgun. So that would be preemption on the federal level, and we see the benefit to that. And if we could protect ourselves in all 50 states, that would be incredible. Now, the third issue, and this one might be a little bit of a hot topic, but I think it's very, very important, is gun-free zones.
Yes. No gun-free zones is like after Richard has had a couple drinks, that is the mantra of the evening, regardless of what else is happening. But no gun-free zones is, um, it sounds radical, I guess, when you sort of say it out loud like that, but it's
Right.
not. It's not. Why is it not?
Well, we look at these targets for mass killings, and we've looked at the manifestos of these people
Mhm.
and figure out why are they acting the way that they're acting. Well, they want high body counts, right? And where do you get these kind of numbers? You get them in places where people can't defend themselves.
Yep.
I mean, whenever these psychopaths say, "Hey, I'm doing this because of this reason," guess what? I kind of believe them. And what do we do to stop them? Well, we need to have armed resistance available to stop the killing. And it's a problem with the media because we don't hear about, they don't make big headlines if a big crime gets stopped, right? It's just when the crime occurs. And so I think folks having the ability to stop threats wherever they find them, I
Mhm.
think that's a really important fight.
Yeah, and when you think about our really high death toll shooting incidences, they're all in gun-free zones, which just makes sense, right? If you know you're not going to encounter armed resistance, that's the place to go if you want to kill a bunch of people. And so the idea that someone who is willing to commit the crime of murder is unwilling to commit a low-level carry crime is just insane. It's insane.
Yeah, and I'd say the preeminent voice on this is Dr. John Lott with the Crime Research Prevention Center. I've seen him testify a million times. He has the data to back this stuff up, and just I mean, really simple things like posting a sign in front of a school saying "staff is armed." He said it doesn't even actually matter if the staff's armed.
Yeah.
If the person thinks that they're going to encounter armed resistance, that will stop the fight. So, I think that's very much worth looking into now. How do we mobilize on these types of issues?
Well, there are lots of ways. First of all, join up with your statewide group or something that exists a little bit higher than the state level. Most states have a wonderful, statewide rifle association group. Gun Owners of America, fantastic organization. You
Second
know,
Amendment Foundation, Firearms
yes,
Policy
Firearms Policy
Coalition.
Coalition.
You're even the NRA still serves a really important purpose. I know people will hate the NRA, but
Yes. What would we do without LaPierre's suits?
yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Um,
Who's got to pick up those giant checks?
Exactly. Join those groups. That's a great first step. If nothing else, but to know when there's an action alert because it is sort of mass action that gets attention. If you are a lone wolf and you don't want to join any of those groups, that's okay too, but you've got to contact your lawmakers. Your federal lawmakers, great. What's really impactful are your state level lawmakers, and it does not take much to move their needle. I mean, as few as 10 phone calls can move a needle for a state lawmaker. So if you've got 9 other buddies, get them together and start making some calls. But let us know what you think. Particularly, I mean, some of you are living in these states where there's no constitutional carry and, the fight is still very real and getting worse. I'm looking at you, Washington, Michigan, Oregon. I'm so sorry.
New Jersey.
New Jersey. Well, that I don't are the do they live in America anymore even?
Right.
I don't know. So, sorry about that. But if you're in a constitutional carry state, this is for you. What is important to you now that you have constitutional carry? Comment. Let us know. Do you agree with us? Is there something we haven't thought about?
But we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti 2A algorithm by sharing this video.
Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.